All right, boys and girls, today we are going to be finishing up our fall tree in perspective by using watercolor paints to paint in the sky around our tree. So every time we paint, we use the same techniques where we start with our wet paintbrush. We're going to get the extra drips off just by touching the inside of the water bucket. That lets all of those drips run back down inside there. We don't want our paint to get too overflowing with water. It just needs to be a little bit damp. It doesn't need to be a puddle. So I'm going to get my extra drips off, and then very lightly we're going to brush on the top of our blue paint. So I'm going to make my sky blue because I want to be looking up into the clear blue sky. So I'm going to get a little bit of that blue paint on my paintbrush, and I'm just going to start going back and forth in a back and forth motion. I am not going to paint over my tree trunk. I'm going to paint around it. And another important thing to remember is that your paintbrush should never have crazy hairdo. It should always have a nice, slick hairdo. It should never have wild and crazy hair. Now, once I get up a little bit closer to my leaves, I am going to paint over the top of the leaves. And the reason for this is that if there is any white paper showing through, the blue paint will stick to it, so it will look more realistic. We don't want it to stick to any white paper on our tree. So that's why we're painting around our tree trunk, but over our tree leaves. You'll notice that the paint beads up. It doesn't sit, it doesn't absorb into where the oil pastel is. So if we need to, we can always get a paper towel and kind of dab off those extra beads of paint. So again, I'm going to come back with my paintbrush, get the drips off, get a little bit more paint, making sure that I get all of my sky areas filled in with my blue. And a little bit here. Once your paint cup here is wet, then you really don't have to press hard at all to get enough paint for your project. Once that gets wet, initially the paint gets onto your brush a whole lot easier. So that first time you might have to put a couple extra brush strokes to get your paint, but after that you really just need to touch it so super lightly. So I'm still just getting a little bit at a time, going over my leafy areas, but not my brown tree areas. And my paintbrush, again, always has a slick hairdo. It should never have wild and crazy hair. If your paintbrush has bedhead, if it has crazy hair, then you have to make sure that you get it wet, smooth it out, and it'll be ready for you for next time. So now I'm going to go ahead and go back with my paper towel here, or I'm using a tissue because it was just handy right here on my desk, but we're not going to waste tissues for this. We are going to use paper towels. And I'm just soaking up the paint that is beaded up on my oil pastel, just like that. Once you have that done, we will put it in the drying rack and let it dry. And that is it for this fall tree in perspective.